Inside of this box is the PSP Go, an alternative form factor to Sony's PlayStation Portable from 2009 that at least back then didn't get much love. In fact, now with the benefit of hindsight in 2026, along with some choice mods you can make to enhance the experience, I wager that this Ozempic PSP could potentially be a pretty fun console to work on and even play with. But there's only one way to find out. In this video, we'll be going over some of the brief history on the PSP Go. Of course, I'll also be taking this new-to-me example out of the box, since I've only tried a Go like once ever. And then afterwards, we'll be trying some of the easier mods that I found online to see what you can really do with a PSP Go in 2026. I think most people out there could agree that the PSP did quite well as Sony's first attempt at a handheld console. After all, it quite literally rode the coattails of the best-selling game console of all time, the PS2, while also touting living room grade 3D graphics, but in your pocket. Okay, the visuals might have not necessarily been at PS2 levels, but the hardware and functionality was still way ahead of its time on the PSP. The widescreen display, onboard Wi-Fi, the XMB interface that Sony has still, in my opinion, not topped to this very day, which also let you play movies and music. Needless to say, the PSP was part of an era that was defined by a lot of energy in the PlayStation brand. And specifically for the PSP, Sony worked to build on this momentum by getting a device in as many hands as possible. Following the launch of the original PSP 1000 in 2004, the company would revise the console a number of times, not only to reduce manufacturing costs, but also to make it more affordable at retail. When the PSP hit store shelves in the US, it cost $249, which was not particularly cheap, especially when you consider its primary competitor, the Nintendo DS, went for $100 less. However, mid-cycle refreshes by way of the PSP 2000 and 3000 series models brought down pricing to $169. Nice. Not only that, but much later on, Sony would release the PSP Street, which, mind you, was only available in PAL regions, but went for a stupidly low £85 in the UK. This is an important point to bring up, because where all these models I just mentioned were motivated by optimization, the PSP Go, by comparison, feels a bit more like a science experiment. And what better way to show you what I mean than getting this thing out of the box? Opening this bad boy up, let's see what's inside. First of all, we have the PSP Go itself. Love that. Now, as for the PSP Go itself, it had a rather unique design. First of all, to even see all of your buttons, the whole screen up here slides up. That mechanism feels so freaking satisfying. And when you slide it up, it automatically turns this thing on. Oh, I didn't even realize it did that. So it shows a clock when it's just sitting here on idle, which is neat. Oh, and when you hit both shoulder buttons, it turns to a calendar, which is currently set to January 3rd, 2011. It's okay, buddy, you probably don't want to live in 2026. Now, as far as the actual condition of this PSP Go that I acquired from eBay for $200, I think a lot of that value probably went to the fact that we have a complete set with the box, but the actual quality of the console itself, it definitely leaves more to be desired. There is a lot of scratches, especially on this piano black finish. Also, the screen is quite scuffed. And I don't know what the original shoulder buttons felt like, because this is my first PSP Go, but these don't have a lot of feedback to them. Similarly, there's not a lot of travel here, especially for our X, circle, square, and triangle. That aside, again, the screen actually looks surprisingly good, and this speaker is loud, at least just listening around for these XMB clicks. Alright, but given the current state of this PSP Go, I cannot wait to actually tear this thing down and give it the TLC it deserves to make it look nice and clean. But before that, something that you might notice, especially compared to the original PSP, is the lack of a UMD drive. Not only did this mean that the Go was exclusively a digital-only device, but it was actually the first PlayStation to do this. It's actually kind of funny to think about in hindsight, especially given current events, but also most certainly in the context of 2009, this made the PSP Go quite a difficult device to live with. I mean, for one, downloading downloading games digitally just wasn't as convenient back then as it is now. Wi-Fi was slower, less reliable, and honestly, kind of a pain to rely on for big downloads. But also, the PlayStation Store couldn't exactly guarantee a one-to-one selection between physical and digital titles. Flat out, there were a number of UMD games you simply could not play on the PSP Go. Not to mention, if you were already a huge fan of the PSP that was hoping to double dip with your newer, slimmer model, tough luck, you actually had to re-buy all of the UMDs digitally. Slight asterisk, supposedly they set up a system in Japan to upgrade your games from UMD to digital with some kind of discount, but I don't think it really made a dent in things. But also, adding insult to injury, the PSP Go did use a newer and smaller version of the PSP memory card for storage called Memory Stick Micro. In some fairness to Sony, these weren't quite proprietary in the same way that we saw with memory cards on the PS Vita. But even still, pricing and available capacities were far worse than what we saw with standard memory stick duos on the regular PSP, which made the value proposition for Sony's digital-only PSP pretty rough. All this to say that, unsurprisingly, sales for the PSP Go weren't exactly good. At launch, this thing sold somewhere between 100 to 150,000 units in the US, which for a new Sony console was considered a flop. It is worth noting that it's hard to pin down exact numbers here since Sony cleverly folded the PSP Go's sales into the PSP line overall in their reports. But some estimates do suggest that the company sold less than 2 million units total before ending production just 18 months after release. Not only did poor sales incentivize them to do this, but also they needed to gear up for the successor, the PS Vita, which would launch in 2011. So now, with that piece of the puzzle, as well as the overall story with the benefit of hindsight, if you ask me, I don't think Sony had to necessarily go out on a limb with the PSP Go, this science experiment. After all, for one, it didn't exactly work, but two, the company resources and manpower they used to push the PSP Go to market could have probably been better spent on PS Vita development entirely. The implications here being that perhaps the PS Vita could have been better, and/or perhaps they could have moved the launch window forward. Because as I mentioned in my PS Vita video a couple of weeks ago, part of why that console failed is because a year after that hit the market, Sony was forced to deprioritize it in favor of its living room flagship, the PS4. To put it simply, Sony were laying down the track as the train was coming. They weren't allowing enough time between these releases, which I would argue, worked to the detriment of Sony's portable consoles, period. Shortly after unboxing the PSP Go, the first thing I did was swap out the outer shell, which was pretty scuffed. And surprisingly enough, getting into the Go itself and tearing it down was cake. Undoing a couple of Phillips head screws lets you take off the backplate, giving you access to, among a bunch of things, the battery. While it's still not as easy to get to as the standard PSP, which has a user-accessible battery door, it is still very easy to take out, though funny enough, it is tied down with a warranty void sticker. Obviously, taking it off now wouldn't present much of an issue since this device is well beyond discontinued. But it is very interesting to see because this is likely a result of people using modded batteries to hack their PSPs. Regardless, with about 5 minutes of work between undoing ribbon cables, more screws, and adhesive, I was able to break free the motherboard, all of my buttons, as well as the slider assembly, which lives on the backplate of the screen half of the PSP Go. And then I took all of these parts and transplanted them into a shiny, brand new blue shell, along with installing a used but cleaner OEM screen. Guys, this PSP Go looks so freaking clean. Not only do we have significantly less scratches on here than we had before, but this blue colorway absolutely pops. We even have original looking logos on here, which is awesome considering this case is aftermarket. I'll link the one that I used in the description below, but do keep in mind that this shell replacement kit is far from perfect. The fitment could be better in some places, and also I did end up using a mix of OEM buttons and plastic trim since the color matched ones simply didn't look or feel as good as the original. Of course, with the Go being essentially a standard PSP outside of its quirky design, it is also pretty easy to hack and unlock the OS. Bear in mind, this does require you to transfer files onto the PSP Go itself, And so to make that easy, I actually picked up this USB-C adapter off Amazon for about 20 bucks. It might not be the cheapest one in the world, but it's certainly the cleanest adapter that I've seen that's also small enough and has a lanyard on it to tie onto the Go itself for not only easy data transfer, but also charging wherever I am. But yeah, this cute little dongle worked absolutely flawless. Plugged it into my computer, followed the instructions on the PS Punk website, and literally with a few button presses and a couple of minutes of my time, we got Arc 5 custom firmware permanently flashed onto our PSP Go. Now with that done, there is plenty we can do to enhance our PSP experience. Top level, one of my favorite things to do with a modded PSP is overclock. In some games where you might have experienced occasional stutters and low frame rates, setting higher CPU clock speeds than stock could actually get you smoother motion and take better advantage of that 60Hz panel. Plus, on top of that, you can also enable a performance overlay just to make sure that the settings you tweaked are working as intended. Additionally, now that our console's running custom firmware, getting ROMs of PSP and PS1 titles up and running is stupid easy. Now, I'm not going to tell you where to actually source your games. Use Google if you want to find nefarious ways to do that. However, something to definitely keep in mind when you have a hacked PSP Go is that while it does come with 16 gigabytes of storage on board, you will likely run out of that fast if you are hoarding ISOs. Now, unless you plan on stocking up on those stupid M2 memory cards, which are still freaking expensive in the aftermarket, you'll probably want to try out a storage mod like this. Basically, it uses the existing M2 memory card slot on the PSP Go, but with a ribbon cable and a micro SD card adapter on the other end. In theory, you'll be able to expand your storage as high as 128 gigs. This should be able to hold a crap ton of games for you, only the one that I sourced from geniusgamemods.com sadly didn't work, which is a shame because I've seen plenty of other examples for this specific part working for other people. Perhaps my unit was just a dud and I will likely swap it out after this video for another unit. But basically, if it was functioning, it would sit in the console just like this, which would have been sick. Moving on, something that I found really interesting about the Go after using it a bit more is that this console actually has a built-in quick resume function for games. Now, since the console was optimized for playing titles from memory, you were able to pause your game state, say, listen to music on the XMB, even turn off the console. Then, when you were ready to game again, you could simply pick up where you left off. Honestly, I think this is a pretty cool feature that's easily missed when looking at the PSP Go at a glance. But especially when it comes to custom firmware, supposedly for the longest time, hacking the Go would render that feature useless. But thankfully, I'm happy to report that with the modding scene sorting out the Go even more, we are able to take advantage of this feature no problem. Alright, so in this video, we went over the history of the PSP Go, I unboxed one, refurbished, and also hacked it as well. But would I actually recommend getting one to play with regularly in 2026? To be completely honest with you, I was banking on its sleek form factor and the crazy amount of modding support with the PSP to carry the experience forward. But sadly, I'm leaving kinda disappointed. As stupid as it sounds, I think a lot of this has to do with the buttons. Namely, the lack of tactile feedback are probably the biggest deal breakers for me. I mean, yeah, this console looks cool and is incredibly thin. I'd even go as far as saying that it's surprisingly comfortable to hold. However, the sheer trade-off this design makes to button travel makes the PSP Go not particularly fun to game on. Especially when you keep in mind that otherwise this console is a standard PSP, you might as well get just that. Maybe a later 2000 or 3000 model, or even better, what about a PS Vita? I recently had a good time revisiting this orange example a few weeks ago, which not only feels like a natural evolution to the PSP in design, but also has more powerful hardware to maximize your PSP games and has a nicer screen and buttons to boot. Not to mention it also plays Vita games and has the ability to emulate games from other consoles as well. Especially if you get a kick out of modding legacy consoles, that's probably what I would go for. Regardless, the PSP Go was still fun to work on, but let me know, what do you think about this console in the comments below? And otherwise, thanks for watching this video on Denki Chan.